is I, Wacky Anime What If, here to present you with What If Deku Had a Monster Creation Quirk Part 3. Midoriya doesn't remember exactly what happened, but he thinks that he was helped by someone. But when he awoke and saw this figure, he couldn't help but to say stop because it was about to kill someone. He didn't exactly see who it was because his mind was foggy and he had just gotten up from a near-death experience and his eyes were kind of hazy. He couldn't see much except this tall figure that was about to swipe down on this very bulky person with blonde hair. And when Midoriya screamed stop, it just stopped and it just vanished from thin air into smoke. And the smoke started surrounding Midoriya and disappeared. And Midoriya didn't really know what was happening, but he was coughing up blood because the villain, the slime villain that suffocated him, when it was suffocating him, it increased his blood flow for survival. That's what his body did. And the blood flow ended up going through the lungs. When it was accelerating through the whole body, it punctured through the lungs because of prior injuries from Bakugo and his goons and all the abuse he's been dealt. Some of those old wounds have reopened, and it caused him to bleed out of the mouth. He's coughing up blood, and All Might looks at him and just asks, "What was that, Midoriya? What was that creature?" And Midoriya just looks at him and says, "Toshinori, shut the fuck up for once." And All Might just looks at him and he's in shock. And he says, "Who's this Toshinori you speak of?" And Midoriya says, "I know damn well that you're All Might, Toshinori. I've known for a while, and I don't really care." And he's getting up while barely being able to stand, and he's holding on to the sides of the wall of under the bridge to the right, and he's lifting himself up, and All Might's trying to help him, but Midoriya just slaps his hand away and says, "Oh wow, you're trying to help me now. You never helped me when I was being beaten, bruised, shattered, uncared for, neglected. You never helped me. You neglected me, abandoned me. You let all of the abuse happen to me. When Bakugo shattered my bones, left burn marks on me, injuries that would never heal. And Azumi ended up using her quirk to consistently pester and bully me, saying I could never become a hero, breaking me down from the inside, mentally and physically. Did you ever help me? No, you ignored my suffering. So why start caring now? You don't have the right to ask me of anything. So, Toshinori, stay the hell away from me." And he coughs up blood, and Midoriya is about to pass out, but he forces himself up to walk, and he starts walking away from under the bridge. And Toshinori just looks at Midoriya's back, and he realizes, I've messed up. My only son is very hateful of me. He had to go through all of that. I didn't even notice because I didn't spend time with him. I just kept on going over my so-called successful child. How could I have neglected him for all this time? And he's contemplating this. And he forgets all about the sludge villain because there's one little thing of slime going down the sewer while All Might's contemplating this and Dory is walking out of the bridge. But that sludge villain, he's gonna have a fate worse than death. Once he goes into the sewer system, he's in the sewers, he's walking through, and he's trying to get out. It's darker and darker when he's going through the sewer tunnels, and he hears bones breaking, mending. He hears a roar that doesn't sound human, and it's getting more monstrous It's getting closer, and he doesn't know where it's coming from. It's echoing all over the sewer walls. It's bouncing everywhere. It's as if it's the entire sewer itself, some type of monster or entity. And he's hearing blood curdling screams, agony, hatred, anger, a roar that seems like it faced death itself and came out on top. It was so terrifying that the sludge villain that was had to go into his human state because his quirk would not let him activate it anymore, because his sheer fear forced him into his human state. He couldn't stay in his sludge state or use his quirk out of sheer shock and fear. And then he hears footsteps from all angles, from in front of him, from behind him, everywhere, closing in on him. He's starting to look around frantically. He looks behind him, then in front of him. Then he starts seeing lights from behind him and in front of him, starting to get closer, and then start blinking. They're gone, then they reappear. And then the lights are getting closer to him. And then they're all the way in front of his face. Right in front of him. And they disappear. And he ends up hearing something. And then the light appears again. And then there's this monster towering over him. And it looks at him and says, "You, my prey, must die." And all you could see is this 9-foot tall man from before. Not a man, this is a monster. Its mask shattering. He puts his hand over his mask and rips it off. And you could hear the sound of his flesh being ripped off along with the mask. And you could see the fibers of his muscles inside of his face restructuring, with the skin melding out of it. And you could see all the flesh flying off the face, wrapping around the sludge villain. And the sludge villain feels this flesh piercing into his skin, going into his bones and wrapping around whilst crushing it. And the sludge villain screaming out in agony. And the monster just gets its long hands and wraps it around the sludge villain's head. The fingernails dig inside of the head and through each of the ears and goes right into the middle. And once they meet, they plunge directly through the brain, but not killing the sludge villain. No, the sludge villain isn't dead yet, because the monster made sure not to hit a vital part of the brain, because he made sure that he wouldn't die a quick, painless death. He wanted him to suffer, and he was enjoying it. The monster let out a little chuckle. And the sludge villain just couldn't help but scream from all the pain, his bones being crushed, grinded to dust from the inside, the flesh stabbing, going inside of his body, and penetrating through every single part of his body, coming out of his guts, coming out of his kidneys, going straight through his heart, wrapping around it and crushing it, and then letting it beat again just to crush it even harder, then making it expand, it regenerate, and then crushing it again. This continued for what felt like hours, until the monster got bored, and it opened its mouth and unhinged its jaw, and these sharp teeth came out. There were 5 sets of teeth inside of its mouth, and it unhinged it, and its mouth reached all the way over the sludge villain's head, and the man was terrified, and all he could hear was a crunching sound before it all went black. And POV change. Midoriya is walking home wondering what happened to the sludge villain. All Might probably was in a state of shock. Yoshinori is in a state of shock and probably didn't do his job properly. Knowing him, he probably neglected to do his duties like how he neglected him. And while he's walking home, he ends up thinking back on what that person was and who helped them. He doesn't really know who that was, but they seemed monstrous in appearance. but he can't really say much. I mean, he's called a monster himself, so him calling another person a monster would just seem, well, quite hypocritical or quite ironic. He starts to chuckle to himself because that very statement is funny to him. While he's walking home, unbeknownst to him, there's this 9 foot tall creature following him, and it's peering very stealthily behind Midoriya, and it just disappears into a black smoke. And Midoriya, right when he's in front of his door, he passes out, and this smoke goes directly into his mouth and goes into his body when he's passed out and unconscious. And it speaks into his unconscious mind, saying, Midoriya, I will make you the monster that they fear. I will make you me, and I you. And Midoriya heard that before he went completely unconscious. Midoriya then ended up waking up, and he was on his bed, and he sees his worried father, Toshinori, and he just looks at him in disgust because now he cares for him. Is it because he thinks he has a quirk or something? He immediately pieced that together when he saw a quirk doctor inside of his room, just staring at him, and was doing x-rays at his bedside. And he told Toshinori he didn't have a quirk. And Toshinori just didn't really pay much attention to the doctor's news and just started looking at Midoriya tenderly and worriedly. And Midoriya couldn't help it. He grabbed the trash bin nearest to him and he threw up. He started puking out some blood with it, because some of his old wounds that he had when he was being bullied, still being bullied, they reopened. And the internal damage that was caused from Bakugo's explosions over the years, it racked up to where Midoriya is actually just a cripple now. He's not just quirkless, he's crippled everyone else now, because of what Bakugo and Izumi did. Izumi never knew the extent of the damage, but Bakugo knew the entire extent because he wanted it that way. Bakugo always felt inferior to Midoriya, because Midoriya was always so smart. While Bakugo couldn't understand most things, but he could understand that he's powerful, Midoriya's weak. So, if he doesn't want Midoriya to rise up above him, he could just ruin his self-esteem, make it to where he goes down, and then dumbs, makes it to where he's so depressed he won't ever reach his full potential. So he started beating on Midoriya, causing internal injuries with his explosions, which were invisible from the inside, but quite visible from the outside. You could see the pain he was in whenever Bakugo beat him with his explosions. But they didn't think that the explosions were that strong to where there was actual internal damage. And the doctors and, well, nurses, they always examined his outside appearance because they only had to make it seem like they treated him. They didn't even do x-rays on him or examine his insides. So whenever Midoriya had broken bones, he had to do it himself. And he didn't have any of the funding or any of the luxuries to really heal himself to a certain extent. So he didn't do that well of a job. So there's a lot of internal injuries. And the doctor even told All Might this, which All Might was in shock. And he stared at Midoriya, who was puking even more. But this time the blood's finally stopped, and he's wondering, why is Midoriya puking? What's wrong with my son? And he said this out loud, and Midoriya looked at him with disgust. I'm not your damn son, old man. I'm not your son. My name's Izuku. I don't have a last name. You should know this by now, Toshinori. And this hits All Might to the core. Midoriya packs up all of his things in his room, in front of the doctors, in front of Toshinori, in front of Inku, who's just walked in. They all see that Midoriya's packing all of his things, and they ask what he's doing. Midoriya says, I'm moving. I can't deal with you. I can't deal with Izumi. If I just have to stay here anymore, I'll probably kill myself. And he says this with a deadpan face, dead serious tone, and they look at him with sorrow in their eyes, with regret, with wanting to have atonement. This just makes Midoriya even more sick to his stomach. They never tried to atone for what they did previously. Why would he give them a chance? So he got all of his things, he packed it into a backpack, and he was walking outside the house. His sister Azumi rushed up towards him and ended up punching Midoriya in the face, saying, so you're so weak that you decided to just leave the household because you were just under some abuse? And Midoriya just looked at her and said, you're one of the reasons why I'm leaving. I can't handle your attitude, your condescending demeanor, the fact that you and all your friends think you can pick on me because I'm quirkless, because I was born like this, because I am who I am. Why is it exactly? Huh? Is it because you hate me? And he says this with as much hatred in his voice as possible. Zumi's never seen the most hatred, any of the hatred in Midoriya's eyes. Midoriya would try to smile off being beaten. But no, Midoriya's had enough of this. He doesn't want to be anyone else's punching bag. And he just says, Izumi, I forever will hate you for what you've all done to me. I have scars all over my body. 90% of my body is full of scars. My internal organs are scarred, are injured, are mostly punctured. It's a miracle I'm alive. And honestly, I don't care if I die or not anymore. I really don't. But I will not be near any of you. And he merely walks away while Azumi says, why are you really leaving? He says, you already know, I just told you. But if you're not going to listen, then I don't have to tell you again. And he just walks away. And Azumi reflects on the past of what she did. And she seems a little sorrowful. But Midoriya doesn't give a shit. They had years to atone for it. Midoriya has been patiently giving them time to atone for it, thinking things would get better. But that voice in his head keeps on saying, humans will never get better. And Midoriya is starting to talk to the voice in his head. I'm human. So, does that mean I can't get better either? And the voice says, you, not human. But Midoriya just shoves this off because he doesn't want to lose his humanity. Not just yet. He wants to keep hold of this so he can become a hero. Because monsters are just creatures of destruction. He wants to become a creature of light. That's the light in the darkness. Not the darkness that swallows the light. He wants to become the light. So Midoriya quickly gets an apartment near UA. And he starts training. And that's where I'm going to end. What if Deku had a Monster Creation Quirk Part 3? I hope you all enjoyed. And I'm sorry if I don't upload as often. I'm going from, different places, because I'm currently moving. I don't really know where to move to exactly. So this might be a while until I upload sometimes. Please bear with me.